Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Gabriella. In today's video, I will be talking about one of my favorite art supplies, which is the Stabilo Woody 3-in-1 crayons. I've had these crayons, or at least most of them, for over 3 years at this point, and some of them, including the pastel shades, are quite new. But altogether, we can say that I've been using these on and off for the past 3 years. The Stabilo Woodies are an extremely versatile medium that is originally intended for kids, but for very good reasons, they are very popular among mixed media artists. They are extremely versatile. You can use them as crayons, you can use them for coloring, you can dilute them with water, you can mix them with acrylics, you can use them on various surfaces such as glass. They're really great. You can do a lot of stuff with them. Although I have to admit that over the past 3 years, there has been some hits and misses here and there. Sometimes the art turned out great, other times it turned out pretty terrible, and I ended up throwing it in the bin, being really frustrated. And I really couldn't put my finger on it, like what the problem was, why sometimes I just couldn't achieve the kind of result that I really desired. And these hits and misses kind of resulted in kind of a love and hate relationship with these crayons. Sometimes I wouldn't even touch them for several months because I was just so mad that I couldn't really achieve what I wanted. But then I took them out again and I drew something amazing, and then it just went on and I couldn't figure out why. So in the end, I decided to create not one, but 2 videos about these crayons. One is going to be dry application. The second part is going to be about wet application. And I'm going to show you various arts that I created using these crayons. Some of them turned out pretty good, others not so great. And I will give you kind of an explanation why that is. Also, just a disclaimer that because these crayons are extremely versatile, there's dozens of ways to use them. So what I'm going to show you in these 2 videos is just kind of my way of using them. And there's plenty of other mixed media artists and crafters, card makers, and so on and so forth who use these crayons in various different ways. So I recommend that you watch a couple of videos. So this is kind of like my 2 cents on how to use Stabilo Woody crayons. So what does 3-in-1 mean? That is something that I am to this day confused about. For a long time, I thought that it was simply water-soluble crayons in a pencil form. But then I read on one of the retailers' websites, it wasn't Stabilo, it was one of the retailers saying that when applied cold, whatever that is, they basically behave like normal pencil crayons. When applied a little bit heated up, slightly warm, then they become softer like oil pastels. And when diluted with water, they basically become like watercolors. Now, if you ask me, you can't really be all 3 because pencils, watercolors, and oil pastels are quite different. So it is going to be something in the middle. And that's exactly what these crayons are. They are softer and waxier than regular pencil crayons. They are harder than normal oil pastels. And they are a little bit more opaque and thicker and also waxier than regular watercolors. Although I have to say, there's definitely truth to that. I haven't thought about it before, but obviously now that it's summertime and the temperature is rising, I have also noticed that the crayons are a lot softer than usual. That's kind of natural. But in my opinion, if I have to kind of describe this medium, in my opinion, they are closest to oil pastels. Like some of the harder oil pastels like the Camlin, or these kids oil pastels. However, I have to say the pigment load is a lot better than in some of the cheap oil pastel sets. What I also like about them, because they are also harder and have these sharp edges, even though the pencil itself is kind of blunt, it's easier to draw details with them than with regular oil pastels such as the Mongyo Gallery and so on. So I really quite like them in regular oil pastel drawings. So let's say we want to create an oil pastel drawing. What do we need for that? A paper that is good for pastels in general, something slightly textured, not overly textured, something that the pastel can go on top of, and that will enable for us to create layers. And we are going to need something that is preferably a toned paper, brown, gray, or even a black paper, because oil pastels usually appear even more beautiful on toned paper than just regular white paper. So the first two papers that I'm going to show you are two pastel papers, the Fabriano Tiziano and the Canson mitten paper. These are the two pastel papers that I have, and this is what they look like. You might recognize these two drawings from two other videos. This is a drawing that I made for the Pastel Shades review, and this is the one that I made for the Fabriano Tiziano review. I absolutely love this paper, and I really don't mind how textured it is. Obviously, it is made for oil pastels, which are slightly softer. These are a little bit harder, so obviously you're going to see some of the paper peeking through this, something that I really don't mind. But if this is something that disturbs you, then I recommend the Canson mitten pastel papers, which have one rough side and one smooth side. This practically looks like an oil pastel drawing. However, a very big difference is that the actual crayon is a lot thinner and a lot less messier. There's no crumbs, there's no smudging. I put one or maximum two layers of fixative on top. There's no smudging. I could put this into a portfolio or a sketchbook and it would stay put. Now let's take a look at another paper, which is going to be the Fabriano black paper, a black toned, completely smooth drawing paper if you don't like rough surfaces. Basically, what I wanted to show you here is the pros and cons of the two otherwise very different black papers. One is thinner, only 160 GSM and rough. The other one is heavyweight, 300 GSM and completely smooth. And needless to say, the effect is going to be completely different. So what the rough surface does, it allows you to lay down thicker layers of pigment, which are going to appear a lot more vibrant and opaque as opposed to the smooth paper. Like here, what I don't like about this drawing is that I did not manage to achieve the opacity that I was going for. And also because the paper is so smooth, the crayons started to peel off. So here, even though the paper is completely smooth, I'm trying to show you, it started to peel off because the crayons had nothing to hold onto. Now I know from experience that these kind of smooth, heavyweight drawing papers work usually okay with softer oil pastels like the Mangio Gallery and Sennelier, and probably okay with Prismacolors and Durban Chromopho and stuff like that, but not so much with these kind of crayons. Although I have to show you something really interesting. If you still want to go for the smooth surface, these are the swatches of Neocolor 2s, and these are the Stabilo Woodies. And I don't know how well this shows on film, but the Neocolor 2s, to my biggest surprise, appeared a lot more opaque than the Stabilo Woodies, or at least most of them. So if you still want to stick with these smoother toned papers, I would recommend picking out some colors from the Neocolor 2s and use those along with the Stabilo Woodies. As far as I'm concerned, in the future, I think I will just skip this paper for crayon arts, and I will stick with the Fabriano Tiziano paper, which I quite like, and also the Canson mitten papers are also quite nice. So I will just keep on drawing on these pastel papers. I think that they work a lot better. Another paper that I really enjoy using for crayons and oil pastels in general is the Paperchase craft card paper, the A4 size, which is the paper that you could see in all of my Mangio aquarelle oil pastel speed paints. It's a super budget-friendly craft paper. It's not even advertised as art paper. I think it's literally to make cutouts and so on. I bought a whole package of it for about £2 2 years ago when I was in London, and I've been using it ever since for crayon art. Now, considering the fact that I bought about 50 pieces for less than £2. I don't think that this paper is archival, but it's a very good practice paper that I highly recommend, especially considering that the Canson Mitent and the Fabriano Tiziano paper are kind of pricey. So if you just want to practice mixing crayons, oil, pastels, and it's not for display, not for selling, I highly recommend this paper because honestly, this is like my favorite surface for using these crayons. It's amazing. I really, really enjoy making this piece. Next, I'm going to show you some surfaces that I particularly like for these crayons. My favorite sketchbook is the Talents Art Creation series. I have quite a lot of these. They are super affordable, archival, not completely white. It's more like a yellowish beige color, and it has a very, very light texture, just enough for the crayons to lay down really nicely. These are made with the Stabilo Woodies only. I loved making this piece as well. I recorded a video for this one. This is Neo colors used with Stabilo Woodies and another quick sketch of a rose using the Stabilo Woodies. I am probably going to fill this up using nothing else but Stabilo Woodies, maybe along with the Neo Color 2s. I love this paper. They are available all over the world. I highly recommend that you get one. Another sketchbook that works okay for crayons like this is the Lloyd Turm 1917 Square. I think this is originally a marker sketchbook. I really don't know. And I've been using this sketchbook for some of my videos. I have a speed paint for this one. This is also Neo Colors with Stabilo Woody, and I really enjoyed drawing on this surface. This is completely white, has a very slight texture, just enough for the crayon to get a hold of the paper. And yes, again, highly recommend it. Another surface that I really enjoy working on is old book papers. This was quite fashionable a couple of years ago. I don't know if it still is. I started this sketchbook last year and I never finished it, but I made quite a lot of drawings, mixed media pieces, usually gouache with crayons on top. This is made entirely with the Stabilo Woodies, and I really enjoyed drawing this one. Obviously, this is not an archival paper. It's an old book paper that is already turning yellow. It has a slight texture, and even though it's very thin, it seemed to handle the Stabilo Woodies quite well, and I don't know if I'm ever going to finish this, but if I do, it's probably going to be crayons all along. Yeah, if you're into... Oh, here's another one, but I think this is Neo Colors. Anyway, if you're into something like this, I highly recommend Stabilo Woodies for this kind of like old book art projects. Now that we're talking white paper, I'm going to show you a couple of surfaces that I do not recommend for Stabilo Woodies. One is going to be the Fabriano 1264 Bristol paper that is 200 GSM. And this shocked me. And to be honest, the only reason why I finished this drawing was for the sake of this video. I'm not entirely sure what happened here because on the one hand, it is like quite smooth, but at the same time, the crayon just would not entirely cover the paper like it should have. It would not mix, and also it could only handle one single layer and then nothing else. So that's why you can see these blobs of different colors, because they just wouldn't mix together. And yeah, it's kind of a disaster. Just for reference, here's the drawing that I made on the Paperchase craft cardstock. I mean, same supplies. And this is kind of the purpose of this whole video. Like, I don't want you guys to feel frustrated if you try out some surface that simply does not work well with crayons. Then I have all these other suggestions that I think are suitable for these kind of crayons so that you can create better art. Yeah, I don't know about other Bristol papers. This is the only one I have. I don't use Bristol papers, to be honest, so I really have no other point of reference. This did not work, so I'm definitely not going to use it. Also, speaking of white paper, I also do not recommend cold pressed Watercolor Papers. This one is Fabriano 1264 watercolor paper that is simply too textured for this kind of art. Like no matter how hard you press it down, it's just not going to cover the surface. And this is kind of too much, like compared to the pastel paper. This also has texture, but not so much. So yeah, this is kind of too much. This is still okay. The last one that I'm going to show you, also not recommended, is the Soho Sketchbook paper, which is a Japanese style kind of mixed media watercolor paper. It has a little bit of tooth, but not so much texture like the Fabriano 1264. And honestly, going into this, I thought that this paper will be the perfect white paper for this medium. I have another botched art that I decided not to show in this video that looked even worse than the previous one. Basically, what happened here, the crayons simply would not mix on these paper. I was able to lay them down without the paper showing, but I was not able to mix or layer the colors. And it was kind of a disaster again. Okay, that's it for this video. It's already a little bit too long. This is why I decided to split it up into 2 videos. There's going to be a separate one in which I'm going to talk about the papers that I would recommend for wet application. This is only the dry application. So I guess you could call this one how to use Stabilo Woody's more like oil pastels. And there's going to be a part 2 about how to use them more like watercolors or water-soluble crayons. So thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please give me a like, consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next one.